When my daughter yelled, "You're either going to do what my husband says, or you can get out of my house," I didn't snap back. Before we go any further, if my story has found you, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to see just how far my words can travel. I just gave her a calm smile, grabbed my suitcase, and walked out, leaving behind the home I'd poured my whole life into. She expected me to crumble, like always. But this time, things were different. A week later, I saw 22 missed calls. And trust me, that was only the beginning of my plan. They were going to regret every word, every action. My keys were still warm in my palm when I pushed through the front door that afternoon, grocery bags digging into my wrists. The Saturday sunlight streamed through the living room curtains, giving the whole place that soft spring glow that usually made me feel good. Not today. Zach was sprawled out in my leather recliner, the last gift my wife, Linda, gave me before cancer took her. His socked feet were up, a half-empty beer bottle hanging from his hand. The remote rested on his stomach like he owned the place. He didn't even glance at me. "Grab me another beer from the fridge while you're up," he muttered, eyes glued to the basketball game. I set the bags down slowly, feeling the weight of the milk and bread. The plastic handles had left red marks on my palms. "Excuse me," I said. He didn't look away from the TV. "Yeah. A Corona. Not that cheap stuff you drink." Something cold settled in my chest. I'd bought those Coronas for him, spent my social security check on beer. I wouldn't touch myself. "Zach, I just walked in. I need to put these groceries away." That's when he finally looked at me. His face had that same smug expression I'd seen too many times, the one that said I was being difficult. "What's the big deal? You're already standing. I'm comfortable." "The big deal," I said, "is this is my house." His feet thudded to the floor. He stood up slow, using his size to try and intimidate me. He was 30, bigger and broader than me, but I'd been dealing with pushy people long before he was born. "Your house," he scoffed. "Funny, because your daughter and I live here. We pay the bills with my money." "Details," I said flatly. He stepped closer, beer still in hand. "Look, Frank, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You want to keep living here peacefully? Then play ball." Just then, the kitchen door swung open. My daughter, Emily, stepped in, blonde hair in a messy ponytail, dish towel in hand. She glanced between us, taking in the tension. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice carrying that sharp edge I remembered from her teenage years. "Your dad's being difficult," Zach said without looking away from me. "I asked him to get me a beer, and he's making it into some kind of federal case." Emily shot me a disappointed look, like I was a kid throwing a tantrum. "Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth it." But Zach wasn't done. He stepped in even closer, close enough for me to smell the alcohol on his breath. "See, Frank, here's how it's gonna work. You live in our house, you contribute. That means when I tell you to do something, you do it. No questions, no attitude." "Our house?" I asked. "That's right," Emily said, stepping to his side. "Dad, you need to decide right now. Either you help Zach, or you pack your things and leave." The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at her, searching for any trace of the little girl who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms. All I saw was Zach's same entitled expression staring back. "All right," I said quietly. Zach smirked, thinking he'd won. "Good. Now, about that beer." "I'll pack," I cut in. The smirk slid right off his face. Emily's mouth opened slightly, like she expected me to apologize and shuffle away. I turned toward the hallway, leaving the groceries where they sat. Behind me, I heard Zach suck in a sharp breath and Emily whisper, "Dad, wait." But I kept walking, my footsteps steady on the hardwood floors Linda and I had refinished together 20 years ago. I pulled the suitcase down from the closet shelf, the same one I'd bought for our honeymoon in Yellowstone, back when Linda was alive and our future felt like an open road. Now, it just sat there, ready to swallow up what was left of my life in this house. I packed slowly and deliberately, underwear, socks, 3 changes of clothes. Not everything. Just enough. From the living room came the low murmur of urgent whispers, Zach's voice rising now and then over Emily's softer tone. They were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do with the old man's sudden rebellion. The photo of Linda went into the side pocket, wrapped in tissue paper. My medications, my reading glasses, the small leather journal where I tracked every expense. When I rolled the suitcase down the hallway, their talking stopped. Zach was back in the chair, but now he looked tense, watchful. Emily stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, trying to look tough, but her uncertainty was written all over her face. Neither of them said goodbye. The car started on the first try. My old Chevy purred like it always did. I backed out of the driveway without glancing at the house, not caring if they were peeking from the window. The half-hour drive to Cedar Lodge gave me plenty of time to think. Memories rolled in like waves as I passed through downtown Madison Falls. Emily's college tuition had been $40,000 a year for that private school she just had to attend. I'd worked late nights at the bank for 4 years straight, taking extra clients, reviewing loan applications until my hands cramped. Then came her wedding, $25,000. Zach's family couldn't cover their half, so I quietly took care of it, not wanting to humiliate anyone. The reception hall, the flowers, her gown. Everything had to be perfect for my little girl's big day. Next came the house. $80,000 from my retirement savings for their down payment because, well, young couples need help starting out. At least, that's what I told myself. That's what Linda would have wanted. Then came the steady monthly help, $1,200 for their mortgage, $300 for utilities, $500 for groceries whenever things got tight. My Social Security check vanished into their lives piece by piece, and I convinced myself that was love. Cedar Lodge Motel sat on the edge of town, a squat building with peeling paint and a neon sign that blinked like it was on life support. The room was small but tidy. Bed, chair, little table by the window. I set my suitcase on the rack and sat down heavily on the edge of the mattress. The silence here wasn't the warm kind from home, it was thin, hollow, temporary. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Banks, insurance companies, credit cards, numbers etched into my brain after 30 years in finance. Tomorrow was Sunday, but some things could still be set in motion. I opened my laptop on the little table and logged into my bank account. Balances glowed on the screen: checking, savings, retirement. Numbers that represented a lifetime of careful planning, of saying no to myself so I could say yes to my family. The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting for me to decide the next move. Sunday morning came gray and heavy, matching my mood. I spread my paperwork out like a general laying out a battle plan. Bank statements, insurance policies, legal docs, all in order. My first call was to First National Bank. Automated systems didn't care if it was Sunday. After punching through the menu, a representative finally came on. "Good morning, Mr. Parker. How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Oak Street. Account ending in 4729. A pause. Keys clicking. "Sir, that payment's been active for 5 years. Are you sure you want to stop it?" "Completely sure. May I ask why?" "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial assistance." More clicking. "Very well, Mr. Parker. The payment will be cancelled immediately. You'll get written confirmation within 3 business days." The second call was easier. For 3 years, I'd insured both their cars under my policy, Zach's Silverado and Emily's Honda, costing me $280 a month. "I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy," I told the agent. "They'll need their own coverage." "When should this take effect?" "Today." The credit cards took longer. Emily had been an authorized user on 3 of my accounts: Visa, MasterCard, and Costco. I'd been paying around $500 a month for balances I hadn't created. "Mr. Parker," the Visa rep explained, "removing authorized users means they'll have to apply for their own credit. Any current balance remains your responsibility, but they can't make new charges." "I understand." Remove them now. Each call felt like a brick off my shoulders. 3 decades in banking taught me the right language, the right steps, the right loopholes. Everything I was doing was completely legal. The life insurance change required paperwork, but I got the process started. That was $100,000 meant for Emily. Money I'd earned to protect my family's future. But family didn't mean what it used to. By noon, I'd made 8 calls. Mortgage payments stopped. Insurance canceled. Credit cards blocked. All those quiet drains on my accounts shut down with polite voices and confirmation numbers. I leaned back in the motel chair, looking over my notes, confirmation codes, effective dates, the paper trail of financial independence. My phone sat silent on the table. No calls. No texts. They didn't know yet. But they'd find out soon enough, when the first payment bounced or the first bill landed with their names on it instead of mine. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Across the parking lot, an older man was loading suitcases into a pickup while his wife directed him with calm, steady gestures. Maybe they were heading home from visiting grandkids. Maybe they were finally taking that trip they'd been talking about for years. I couldn't help but envy the way that older couple moved together in the parking lot, passing each other without a word, each knowing exactly what the other needed. Linda and I had been like that once. My phone buzzed on the table, unknown number. I let it ring. The week rolled by quietly for me, though I couldn't say the same for them. I settled into a rhythm at Cedar Lodge. Coffee in the lobby, breakfast at the diner down the street, long walks through Madison Falls' quiet neighborhoods. My phone collected missed calls like some sad little hobby I wasn't interested in. By Wednesday, there were 12 messages. By Friday, 22. I listened to them in order, hearing the change in tone, from mild confusion, to irritation, to outright panic. The first few were casual, Emily wondering if there'd been some kind of banking error with the mortgage. Zach leaving clipped messages about the car insurance lapsing. By midweek, the cracks showed. Dad, what the hell is going on? Emily's voice wavered with frustration. The bank says you stopped the mortgage payment. They want the full amount by Friday, or they'll start foreclosure. Zach's tone turned more aggressive. Frank, you need to fix this right now. People are asking questions about my insurance. You're making us look like deadbeats. The later calls were borderline begging. Emily crying, promising they'd work something out if I'd just call back. Zach trying a softer angle, claiming he'd been too harsh and wanted to make things right. I deleted each message after listening, feeling nothing but a detached curiosity about how quickly their confidence was crumbling. Thursday morning brought a knock at my motel room door. Through the peephole, I saw both of them, Emily in a wrinkled sweater, Zach in his work clothes, both looking like they'd had a bad night. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Dad. Emily's eyes were rimmed red, her usual poise gone. We need to talk. Zach pushed forward, face flushed. About the fact that you're trying to ruin our lives over some stupid argument about beer. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said evenly. I'm just not paying for your lives anymore. The mortgage, Frank. Zach's voice climbed. You can't just stop paying the mortgage. That's our house. Actually, it's my house. My name's on the deed. My signature's on the loan. You were just guests. Emily caught his arm as he took a step closer. Dad, please. We can work this out. Zach was wrong to talk to you that way. We both were. But you can't just leave us without warning, without talking about it first. You gave me an ultimatum, I reminded her. Do what Zach says, or get out. Those were your exact words. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. I looked at her and saw a stranger in my daughter's face. You meant it. You just didn't expect me to choose option 2. Zach tried again, his voice fake calm. Look, we all said things we didn't mean. But you're talking about our home, our credit, our whole lives. You can't just pull the rug out like this. I can, and I did. I started to close the door. You wanted me gone. I'm gone. You wanted to handle your own lives, now you can. Dad, wait. Emily's voice cracked. What about family? What about everything we've been through? I paused. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to hand me dandelions from the yard, who'd rake leaves with me in the fall. But that little girl had grown into someone who could watch her husband humiliate her father in his own home. Family works both ways, sweetheart, I said quietly. I spent 5 years taking care of you both. When it was your turn to take care of me, you chose him instead. Zach's control slipped. You crazy old bastard, you can't just. I can call the police if you keep raising your voice, I interrupted. This is private property, and you're disturbing the peace. They stared at me, maybe seeing me for the first time, not the soft-hearted father, not the walking ATM, but a man who'd finally learned how to say no. Zach grabbed Emily's elbow. Come on. We'll figure it out ourselves. They walked back to the car. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a worried slump. She glanced over her shoulder at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. I watched them drive away, then shut the door and went back to my laptop. There were still calls to make. Accounts to close. The work of dismantling a relationship was far from over. The diner on Main Street had always been my safe place when Linda was alive. She'd meet me there after her doctor appointments, and we'd split a slice of apple pie, talking about nothing that mattered. Tuesday morning, I walked the familiar 3 blocks, my breath visible in the crisp mountain air. That small routine grounded me after yesterday's confrontation. Back in the room, I'd already reorganized my paperwork, bank statements and confirmation numbers laid out like a general's battle plan. The bell over the diner door jingled as I stepped inside. Coffee steam and the smell of bacon wrapped around me, that warm, ordinary comfort I'd been craving. I'd barely slid into my usual corner booth when a familiar voice called out, "Frank Parker." Well, I'll be damned. Bob Harris stood up from a table near the window, folding his newspaper under one arm. We'd worked side by side at First National for 15 years before his transfer to the main branch, him handling commercial loans, me working personal accounts. Enough coffee breaks together to count as friends. "Bob," I said, standing to shake his hand. "Good to see you. Mind if I join you? Haven't seen you since Linda's service." He slid into the booth across from me before I could answer. "Heard you moved out to Cedar Lodge. Everything all right?" The waitress appeared with a fresh mug of coffee before I could respond. I took a sip, weighing how much to share. Bob was trustworthy, but he was also a banker, and bankers had obligations. "Family situation," I said finally. "Needed some space to think things through." Bob nodded, studying my face. "That son-in-law of yours tried to pull a fast one on us a few months back." My coffee froze halfway to my lips. "What kind of fast one?" "Home equity loan. $50,000. On your house." "My house." "That's right." Came in saying it was his property. Even brought in paperwork, looked official at first glance. But when we ran the title search, Bob shook his head. "All came back to you. Clean title, no co-signers, nothing to give him any claim." I set my cup down carefully. "When did this happen?" "December. Maybe January. I took the application myself because of the amount." Bob leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Frank, this wasn't a misunderstanding. The documents he gave us were forged. This was deliberate fraud." It hit me like cold water. 3 months ago, Zach had already been plotting to take from me. This wasn't about any recent fight, this was premeditated. "Did you report it?" "We rejected it, flagged his information in our system. Legally it's a gray area, since no funds changed hands. But I kept copies." I shook my head, thinking about all those mortgage payments I'd been making, all the dinners where Zach griped about money, all while scheming behind my back. What would he need $50,000 for? Bob glanced around, then leaned closer. Application said home improvements. Word around town says gambling debts. Pretty big ones. How big? Jim Morgan might know. You remember Detective Morgan? He mentioned Zach's irregular at Sierra Peaks Casino. I did remember Jim. We'd served on the church building committee together, and his daughter had graduated with Emily. If Jim said it, it was probably true. Bob, I appreciate you telling me. I pulled out my wallet to pay for coffee I'd barely touched. Frank, be careful. A man who forges papers to steal from family might do worse when he's cornered. The walk back to Cedar Lodge had my mind spinning. Zach's arrogance, his beer demand, it all made sense now. I wasn't just a father-in-law to him. I was a bank account he thought he had the right to drain. That ultimatum he'd given me wasn't about respect. It was about keeping his pipeline of cash open. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and started a new file, Zach Harris, evidence. If he'd lied about this, what else was he hiding? The courthouse closed at 5. I had just over an hour. I drove straight from the diner to the Madison County Courthouse, a big brick building that had once intimidated me, but now felt like an ally. The clerk's office was on the second floor. A woman in her 50s processed my eviction paperwork without fuss. Mr. Parker, you understand this is your daughter's residence? She asked, looking over the deed I'd brought. It's my property. The residents have violated the terms of their occupancy. What terms would those be? I'd prepared for this. Verbal agreement requiring mutual respect and contribution to expenses. Both have been breached. She stamped the forms with practiced authority. 30-day notice starts today. If they contest, there's a hearing. If not, the sheriff will serve final papers after the deadline. How soon will they get this? Sheriff's office handles service. Usually within 48 hours. I thanked her and took my copies. The weight of the law was behind me now. No more financial manipulation. No more guilt trips. Everything would go through proper channels. Next stop, the police station. Detective Jim Morgan's office was tucked into a back corner of the station, a cramped space overrun with filing cabinets and coffee-stained paperwork. Jim had more gray in his hair than when I'd last seen him, and deeper lines around his eyes, but his handshake was still as firm as ever. Frank, what brings you to my corner of the world? Information gathering. Bob Harris mentioned you might know something about Zach Harris's gambling habits. His expression shifted to full professional mode. Your son-in-law? What's the context here? I gave him the short version, the ultimatum, my decision to leave, and Bob's story about Zach's forged home loan application. Jim didn't interrupt, just jotted down a few notes. Zach's definitely known at Sierra Peaks, he said when I finished. Regular poker player. Lately, he's been coming in more often, playing bigger stakes. How much does he owe? Hard to pin down. Different creditors, different amounts. Some legit, some not so much. I'd estimate 18 to 20 grand, total. And the less savory ones? They don't usually bother with the police. What kind of timeline are we talking? He's been dodging payment for 6 weeks. Most creditors give about 3 months before they escalate. Zach's running out of road. I left the station with a much clearer picture. The gambling wasn't just a bad habit, it explained everything. The fake loan paperwork. The growing hostility toward me. I wasn't just an easy mark, I was his lifeline. Back at Cedar Lodge that evening, I sat in my room going over the day's progress. Eviction notice filed. Zach's gambling and fraud confirmed. A growing circle of people who knew the truth. I added Jim's notes to my Zach Harris evidence file, right under Bob's statements. Years in banking had taught me to spot patterns, and this one was crystal clear. Zach wasn't just entitled, he was desperate, dishonest, and dangerous. The more cornered he felt, the riskier he'd get. I needed to be ready. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls to his creditors, not to bail him out, but to make sure they understood his true situation, including the fact that he had no claim to my property. The truth spreads fast in a place like Madison Falls. By Friday, I knew I needed to get ahead of the gossip. My first test came at the post office, where Mrs. Henderson from the church mailing committee cornered me near the stamp machine. She collected information the way some people collected recipes. "Frank, dear, I've been hearing troubling things about family matters. Everything all right?" I thought carefully before answering. Whatever I told her would travel to at least a dozen people by Sunday. Emily and Zach asked me to move out, so I did. Sometimes kids need to handle their own responsibilities. Her eyebrows shot up. "They asked you to leave your own house? But didn't you pay for their wedding and help with the down payment?" I just nodded. Facts had a way of speaking for themselves. My next stop was Parker's Hardware, where I'd worked part-time after retiring from the bank. Tom Kowalski, the owner, looked up from his inventory with concern. "Frank, heard you're staying out at Cedar Lodge. What's going on?" Within minutes, 3 other employees had gathered, listening as I explained. Shock turned to anger as they realized how long I'd been footing the bills without thanks. "You paid for their college tuition?" Dave, the assistant manager, asked. "Zach told everyone his family was well off and helping you with mortgage payments." "Zach said a lot of things that weren't true," I said evenly. Tom's face darkened. "Explains why he never took extra shifts. We offered him overtime plenty of times, but he always had other commitments." "Probably at the casino," Sarah muttered from the paint counter. By the time I left, I knew the truth would be all over town by nightfall. Madison Falls Gossip Network was faster than any ad campaign. My third stop was St. Mark's Lutheran Church, where Pastor Williams was preparing for the weekend service. He invited me into his office, offering coffee and the same chair that had comforted plenty of people in trouble before me. "Frank, a few folks have told me they're worried about you. Can you help me understand what's going on?" I appreciated Pastor Williams's direct approach. He wasn't sniffing for gossip. He was trying to help a member of his congregation. "Pastor, I've been supporting my daughter and son-in-law financially for 5 years. Last weekend, they made it clear my staying in the house depended on me following Zach's orders. I decided to leave instead. That must have been incredibly painful." "It was clarifying," I said. "I love my daughter, but I won't be treated like a servant in my own home." He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their choices. Sounds like you've been protecting them from those consequences for a long time." "Too long," I agreed. On my way back to Cedar Lodge, I stopped into Annie's coffee shop for an afternoon cup. The place was buzzing, retirees, off-duty workers, moms with strollers. I took a corner table and listened to the low hum of conversation. "Heard Zach owes money all over town. Frank Parker's been paying their bills for years. Always wondered how they lived so well on his salary." The story was spreading exactly as I'd expected. Small towns work like living organisms. Information moves fast, and the truth has a way of surviving the trip. As I stepped out the door, my phone rang. "Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor for 20 years. Frank, I hope you don't mind me calling. I just thought you should know, there's been a lot of shouting at the house lately. Mostly Zach, but Emily too. Yesterday the police drove by twice. Thanks for letting me know, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate you keeping an eye out. Are you safe where you're staying? Need anything?" Her genuine concern reminded me that community support comes in more than one form. "I'm fine. Just taking things one day at a time." That evening, I reviewed the day's conversations from my motel room. The social pressure was building on its own, no need for me to stir the pot. People recognized injustice when it was laid bare. Another unknown number popped up on my phone. I let it go to voicemail. "This is Marcus Webb from Frontier Financial Services. We're looking for Zach Harris regarding a past due account. Please call us at your earliest convenience." Of course. He'd probably listed my address on his credit applications. More proof of his deception. I deleted the message and updated my evidence file. I should have known they'd fight back. Zach never did go quietly. Saturday morning started peacefully enough. Coffee, reviewing bank statements, until the calls began. First Tom from the hardware store, then Mrs. Henderson, then Pastor Williams. Each carried the same warning. Zach was making his rounds, telling his version of events. "Frank, you need to know what he's saying," Tom told me, his voice tight with anger. "He came in here an hour ago, loud as can be, telling everyone you abandoned them without warning. Said you promised to take care of them forever, then pulled the plug out of spite. Claims you're having some kind of breakdown, that you threw them out because Emily wouldn't let you control every decision in their lives. Oh, and there's a family medical emergency you're refusing to help with." I thanked him, my mind already turning over the implications. Zach was desperate enough to launch a public relations campaign, which meant the pressure from his creditors was reaching a boiling point. The next call confirmed it. "Mr. Parker, this is Detective Morgan. Wanted to give you a heads up. Zach Harris was here this morning filing a complaint about elder abuse. Says someone at the bank's manipulating you into bad financial decisions." I laughed bitterly. Elder abuse? "Total nonsense," Jim said. "We told him we'd need medical documentation and witness statements. Obviously, he can't provide either." 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Emily's number. "Dad, please pick up," she said through tears. "I know you're angry, but there are things you don't understand. I'm pregnant, Dad. The stress from all this is making me sick. The doctor says if things don't calm down, I could lose the baby." A familiar pang twisted in my stomach, the same protective instinct they'd counted on for years. But something in her voice felt staged, too perfectly timed. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said evenly. "When did you find out?" "Last week. Right before everything fell apart," she sniffled. "Dad, I can't lose my baby because of money problems." "You always said family comes first." "Family does come first," I told Emily. "That's why I spent $60,000 on your education, and $25,000 on your wedding." "But what about now? What about your grandchild?" Her question hung in the air. If she really was pregnant, and if there really was a medical issue, my actions could have consequences I hadn't intended. But the timing felt too convenient. The performance too practiced. "Emily, have you seen a doctor about these complications?" A pause. "I have an appointment next week." "Which doctor?" "Dr. Richards, at the women's clinic." I knew Dr. Richards. Linda had seen her for years. "I'll call her office to see how I can help with the medical costs." "Dad, you don't need to call. If there's a genuine medical emergency involving my grandchild, I want to help. Dr. Richards will know how best to proceed." Her tone sharpened. "You can't just call my doctor. That's private." "You're right. She can call me directly to discuss payment options." The call ended abruptly. An hour later, walking downtown, I spotted Zach outside First National Bank. He was talking loud enough for half the street to hear, his voice carrying that aggressive edge I knew too well. "He's lost his mind," Zach was telling a small knot of customers. "Senile old man thinks everyone's out to get him. Kicked his own pregnant daughter out for no reason." I walked up calmly. The crowd noticed me before he did, faces turning, expressions shifting. Zach spun around, color flooding his cheeks. There he is, the man who abandoned his own family. "Hello, Zach." My voice stayed even. "How's the gambling debt going?" That landed like a punch. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "You're crazy," he stammered. "I don't know what you're talking about." $18,000, I said, according to Detective Morgan. Sierra Peaks Casino. Mostly poker. Amazing how much money a man can lose when he's not paying for his own living expenses. His face went from red to purple. He stepped closer, trying to use his size as a weapon. "You senile old bastard, you can't just." I can document every dollar I've spent supporting you for 5 years, I cut in. Can you document where your paychecks went? The crowd leaned in now, eyes on him. Zach realized the narrative had slipped away. Come on, he muttered, shoving past people. This isn't over, Frank. I watched him storm off, noting how several folks pulled out their phones. By the end of the day, his little scene would be all over social media. Back at Cedar Lodge, I added the encounter to my evidence file. Zach's counterattack was collapsing. Lies couldn't survive under scrutiny, especially in a town where people knew my character. Still, the pregnancy claim nagged at me. If it was real, the situation changed. I needed proof. I called Dr. Richards's office. If there was a genuine medical emergency, I'd help, but I wasn't about to be manipulated by a made-up crisis. Zach's public threats had crossed a line. I picked up my phone again and called Jim Morgan. Jim, we need to talk. Zach confronted me in public today, made threats in front of witnesses. He's losing control. Come in tomorrow morning, Jim said. Bring whatever documentation you have. But I didn't have to wait. An hour later, Steve Brennan, the night manager at Cedar Lodge, knocked on my door. Mr. Parker, that man who was yelling in the parking lot earlier came back about 20 minutes ago. Stood outside your door for maybe 5 minutes, then left. Made a few guests nervous. Steve was a retired Army sergeant. He knew trouble when he saw it. Did he say anything? Muttered something about teaching old fools lessons. I've got it on security video if you want it. Steve, would you be willing to give that footage to the police? Absolutely. Guy like that shouldn't be intimidating elderly residents. The next morning, I handed Jim the USB with Steve's footage, plus a written timeline of Zach's behavior. He reviewed it carefully. Frank, this is a clear pattern of intimidation. Combined with what I saw at the bank, we've got grounds for a restraining order. What would that mean? Legal order keeping him 500 feet away from you or your property. If he violates it, he's arrested immediately. Jim leaned back in his chair. Frank, you should know, Zach met with a lawyer Friday about adverse possession laws. The words hit me like ice water. Squatters' rights. Exactly, Jim said. He was looking into whether he could claim legal ownership of your house just by living there continuously. Montana requires 5 years of hostile occupation. They've been there 3. He was planning to wait 2 more, then file. The thought made my stomach turn. Zach hadn't just been freeloading. He'd been running a long con to take my home through a legal technicality. Does he have any actual claim? None, Jim said. Adverse possession only works if you live there without the owner's permission. You let them stay, they never paid rent or property taxes. No case. But it does show premeditation. He's been thinking about this for years. What about the restraining order? I can fast-track it. With this evidence, you'll have it this afternoon. I left the station with a new, sharper picture of Zach's character. The beer incident hadn't been about dominance. It had been about preserving the lie until he could take the house outright. Walking back to my car, I started making calls. The first was to Marcus Webb at Frontier Financial Services, one of Zach's creditors who'd been leaving messages. Mr. Webb, I'm returning your call about Zach Harris. I want to clarify, he doesn't live at my address anymore, has no legal claim to my property, and was a guest in my home until I evicted him last week. If you're looking for him, he works at Mountain View Auto on Highway 93. The second was to Continental Credit Recovery. This is Frank Parker. You've been calling about Zach Harris's debts. He has no ownership interest in my home and no longer resides there. One by one, I contacted 6 different collection agencies. I didn't give out personal information, and I wasn't paying his debts, just correcting the false address he'd used to dodge his creditors. By noon, I'd made sure his carefully built house of cards was starting to sway. That afternoon, Judge Morrison signed off on my restraining order. Zach Harris was now legally barred from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. If he tried, he'd be arrested on the spot. 3 years he'd been laying the groundwork to take my home. Now he couldn't even walk up the driveway without breaking the law. A text pinged from an unknown number. "This isn't over, old man." I forwarded it to Jim, then blocked the number. Evidence collection had become second nature. Monday morning, I filed the order at the courthouse. The clerk stamped the final copy. "This is effective immediately, Mr. Parker. Any contact or approach within 500 feet is a violation." I thanked her and walked toward my car, knowing a deputy would be serving Zach within hours. My phone rang. "Mike Brennan from Mountain View Auto." "I need to ask you something straight," Mike said. "Are the things Zach's been saying about you true?" "What's he been saying?" "That you had some kind of breakdown and threw him out because of dementia. That there's a family medical emergency you're refusing to help with." "Mike, he gave me an ultimatum: follow his orders or leave." I chose to leave. "There's no emergency, and my mental health's fine. My banker, lawyer, and the police can confirm it." There was a long pause. "I was afraid of that. Frank, 3 customers have mentioned Zach owing them money. 1 recognized him from the casino. This is hurting my business. I can't have this kind of scandal in front of my customers. I'm letting him go." 20 minutes later, I was sipping coffee at Annie's when I saw a van from Continental Credit Recovery pull up to my old house. I'd spoken with them Friday about Zach's false address. My phone rang. Emily's number. "Dad, there are men here asking about Zach's debts. They want to know about our income, our assets, everything." Her voice shook, this time with genuine panic. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth. That Zach doesn't own your house and doesn't live here anymore. But they're talking about garnishing wages, seizing assets." "Dad, I don't understand any of this." "Sweetheart, this is what happens when someone borrows money they can't pay back. Those are consequences Zach created, not me. He owes $18,000. How is that even possible?" So, she really hadn't known. Gambling debts. Sierra Peaks Casino, according to Detective Morgan. There was a long silence on the line. Then, quietly, he told me he was working overtime those nights. "I'm sorry you had to learn it this way, Emily. And the sheriff's deputy was here, too. Gave him some kind of legal papers. He's been ranting and throwing things ever since." "The restraining order," I said. Zach was probably just realizing his options had evaporated. "Dad, he's talking about leaving town. Says there's nothing left here for him." Her voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do?" "Make your decisions based on who Zach really is, not who you hoped he was." That evening, I parked across the street from my old house and watched the chaos. 3 creditor vehicles had pulled up that day. Mrs. Patterson from next door gave me a sad wave. She'd been keeping an eye on things like the loyal neighbor she'd always been. Through the living room window, I could see Zach and Emily arguing. His movements were sharp, aggressive, desperate. Hers were defensive, scared. The fairy tale they'd built on my financial foundation was cracking apart. My phone buzzed, a text from Steve at Cedar Lodge. "That guy tried to get in again." I reminded him about the restraining order. He left, but he was furious. I forwarded the message to Jim Morgan. Zach had violated the order within hours of being served. His desperation was making him reckless, and therefore dangerous. But it also made him predictable. A man with gambling debts, no job, and a restraining order doesn't have many plays left. He could face the music, or run. Knowing Zach, running seemed more likely. If he left, what would Emily do? Go with him, clinging to loyalty for a man who'd lied to her? Or finally see the truth? Either way, it was her decision now. My 5 years of shielding them from reality had ended the moment they forced me to choose between my dignity and their demands. I chose dignity. 2 days of watching was enough. Wednesday morning, I called Emily. Meet me at the diner. Just you. I can't leave Zach alone right now, Dad. He's struggling. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order means I can't be around him anyway. A long pause. Where? Main Street Diner. 2 o'clock. Back corner booth. I got there early and picked a seat facing away from the street. I wanted the conversation focused on us. No distractions. When she walked in, she looked older than 28. Stress lines at her eyes, hands fidgeting with her purse strap. She slid into the seat and started talking immediately. Dad, I know you're angry, but Zach's lost his job, and these collectors won't stop. The phone rings all day. People come to the door asking for money we don't have. I waited until she was finished. I'm offering you one chance to end this with some dignity. What do you mean? Public acknowledgement of the truth. Tell people exactly how much I've supported you both, and why I left. Her cheeks flushed. You want me to humiliate myself in front of the whole town? I want you to tell the truth. That's different. What kind of acknowledgement? I'd thought about this for 2 days. Church announcement on Sunday during testimony time. Letter to the editor at the Tribune. Facebook post for all our mutual connections. Full details, college tuition, wedding costs, mortgage payments, and the ultimatum you gave me. Dad, people will think. They'll think you had a father who gave up his retirement to make you happy, and that you took it for granted until it was gone. Emily stared into her untouched coffee. What about Zach? Zach's not part of any equation involving me. The restraining order is permanent. If you stay married to him, that's your choice, but it means you're choosing him over any relationship with me. You're asking me to choose between my husband and my father. I'm asking you to choose between a man who threatened me and the man who raised you. The fact that you see those as equal tells me how far apart we've drifted. She was quiet for a long time. Then, what about the house? It's been in our family for generations. It's going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. 3 veteran families will live there, people who understand what service and sacrifice actually mean. The words hit her like a punch. The will's already changed, witnessed, signed, and filed with my attorney. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Even if you do everything I've asked perfectly, the house won't come back to you. That decision is final. Why? Because I need to know that any reconciliation between us is based on love, not on inheritance. For 5 years, you treated me like a convenient funding source. I want to see if there's anything left between us beyond financial dependency. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the calculated kind I'd come to expect. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. I never meant for it to get this far. Sorry isn't enough anymore, sweetheart. The whole town saw you and Zach treat me like a servant in my own home. They saw you side with his demands over my dignity. Words won't fix that. I need to see actions. What if I can't do it? What if I can't stand in front of everyone and admit we were wrong? Then you live with the consequences. Zach will probably leave town to outrun his creditors. Men like him always run when things get hard. You can go with him, or you can stay here and rebuild your life with honesty. And if I do what you're asking, then maybe over time, we can have a real relationship, not built on money, guilt, or obligation, but on mutual respect between 2 adults. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. How long do I have to decide? Sunday morning. Church starts at 10. If you're not there to tell the truth, I'll know you've made your choice. She stood slowly, looking older and more fragile than when she'd arrived. Dad, do you think you could ever forgive me? I looked at her, really looked, and saw flashes of the little girl who used to braid dandelions into crowns and beg for bedtime stories about brave princesses. Forgiveness and trust are different things, Emily. I forgave you the day I walked out instead of fighting. But trust, that has to be earned back. One honest action at a time. She nodded and walked toward the door, her shoulders bowed under the weight of the decision ahead. I stayed in the booth, watching her drive away. Sunday was 4 days away. By then, I'd know whether my daughter could choose truth over comfort, responsibility over misplaced loyalty. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. I walked into St. Mark's wondering if Emily would find the courage. The sanctuary was fuller than usual, word had gotten around. I sat in my regular pew, 3 rows from the front, and waited. Pastor Williams opened the service with familiar hymns and readings, but I could feel the anticipation in the room. When testimony time came, Emily stood from the back row. She looked small walking down the center aisle, but her steps were steady. At the podium, she gripped the edges and scanned the faces she'd known her whole life. "I need to tell you something important about my father," she began, her voice clear. "For the past 5 years, Frank Parker has supported my husband and me financially. He paid $160,000 for my college when I could have gone to a state school. He paid $25,000 for my wedding when Zach's family couldn't afford their share." Murmurs rippled through the congregation. The numbers painted the picture better than any speech could. "He gave us his family home, the house his parents left him, where he lived with my mother for 20 years. When we couldn't make mortgage payments, he paid them. When we needed groceries, utilities, car insurance, he covered everything, while living on Social Security. 3 weeks ago, when my father refused to follow my husband's orders like a servant, we gave him an ultimatum: obey Zach or leave his own home. Dad chose to leave rather than give up his dignity." The sanctuary was silent now. Even the kids seemed to understand the weight of her words. I stood by while my husband disrespected the man who sacrificed his retirement for our comfort. I chose loyalty to someone who threatened my father, over loyalty to the man who raised me with love and patience. I'm here today because my father gave me one last chance to choose truth over pride. I was wrong. Zach was wrong. My father deserved gratitude and respect, and we gave him ultimatums and demands. She looked straight at me. "Dad, I know I'm sorry isn't enough. But I'm hoping it's a start." The congregation erupted in supportive murmurs as Emily returned to her seat. Pastor Williams stepped forward, his own eyes wet. "Sometimes the hardest courage is admitting our mistakes publicly. Emily has shown that courage today, and her father has shown us what dignity looks like under pressure." After the service, people came to me with hugs, handshakes, and words of support. Mrs. Henderson squeezed my hand. "We all suspected you were helping them financially, Frank. What we didn't know was how they repaid your kindness." Tom from the hardware store clapped my shoulder. "That took real character, what you did. Setting boundaries isn't easy when family's involved." But the most meaningful moment came when Emily walked up to me outside the church. "The letter to the Tribune will run Wednesday," she said. "The Facebook post goes up tonight." She hesitated. "Zach left town yesterday. Packed his truck while I was at work and just vanished. No forwarding address, no note. Nothing." I wasn't surprised. Men like Zach always ran when the consequences finally caught up. "I'm sorry your marriage ended this way." "I'm not," she said quietly. "I filed for divorce this morning. Found out he'd been using my credit cards for gambling without telling me. The debts are worse than we thought." 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of what had once been my family home, watching 3 veteran families move into the transitional housing the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative had created. The house had been remodeled into separate apartments, each with privacy, but with shared spaces for community. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, fresh from deployment, was guiding her 2 kids toward the new playground equipment donated by local businesses. "Mr. Parker, this opportunity means everything to us. Thank you for choosing veterans for this gift." "Veterans understand sacrifice," I told her. "This house should serve people who've truly earned it." My own life had settled into a peaceful rhythm at the small lakeside cabin I'd bought. No more money flowing to ungrateful dependents. Morning coffee on the deck overlooking Flathead Lake. Afternoons fishing. Evenings reading. Simple pleasures that felt like luxuries after years of financial strain and family turmoil. The cabin was small, but perfect for me. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen where I actually cooked, and a dock for my little fishing boat. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Dad, I'm 3 months into counseling and learning a lot about healthy relationships. Could we try having coffee sometime? I'd like to earn your trust back, one conversation at a time. I smiled, looking out at the lake where an osprey hovered over the shallows. Emily had kept her word about the public acknowledgments. The newspaper letter had been thorough and brutally honest. The Facebook post had sparked dozens of supportive comments from people who now understood the real story. More importantly, she was taking responsibility, rebuilding, not expecting forgiveness to be handed over without effort. I typed back, "Coffee sounds good. Saturday morning at the diner." Her reply came instantly, "I'll be there. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me completely." I set the phone down and watched the osprey dive, then rise from the water with a fish in its talons. Sometimes patience and dignity pay off, even when the burden feels endless. The sun sank over the Rockies, painting the lake gold and orange. In the distance, children laughed at the veterans' housing complex. Families starting fresh in the same home where I'd learned the hard difference between generosity and enabling. Justice served. Dignity preserved. And maybe, just maybe, a daughter ready to earn back her father's trust with honesty instead of manipulation. It had been worth the wait. And if my story stayed with you, tap that like button and subscribe. It lets me know you're here, and it helps this story reach the people who might need it most.